Hello, everyone, and welcome. We'll be starting in about 8 minutes, so please stand by. Thank you. Hello, everyone. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. Thanks for coming out. Hi and welcome. We'll get going in about 5 minutes, probably maybe a little less, and got a lot to cover today, so we're going to get started right at the top of the hour. Thanks for joining us. Hi and welcome. Thanks for joining us. I see we're at the top of the hour and we have a lot to cover, so let's get started. My name is Eddie Perlberg, and today you're joining us for the fourth edition of the Unreal Engine and Product Design web series. This will be the final installment in this particular series, but I can assure you that we have a lot more coming up. Joining me today is Craig Barr, professional 3D artist, a technical specialist on the Unreal team, and someone who really knows a lot about what we're going to be talking about. So what are we going to be talking about? First, actually in no particular order. That's going backwards. We'll talk about the necessary hardware requirements to ensure a great VR experience. Then we'll go ahead and take a look at what is virtual reality in the Unreal Engine. Again, examining some stunning examples that are focused on product design and actually outside that industry as well. So we'll take a look at a whole bunch of different examples of how VR is being used in a number of different industries. And then we'll walk you through a typical workflow of creating a VR project, including some best practices, some tips and tricks, how to get that out to your client and whatnot. So a lot of good things. If you're brand new to VR, you're going to learn a lot today. Before we begin, though, let me just point out a couple of things. One of the most asked questions that we get in the chat room is, will there be a replay to this so that I can watch it again? And I want to assure you that in a few minutes after the actual webinar is over, we'll send you a link so that you can go ahead and really dive in, pause, and see what Craig is talking about. So please just sit back and enjoy. We'll also send you a survey that we'll ask you to fill out. Now, during the course of the presentation, we'll be sharing the links to the other installments of the series, so you don't have to be distracted by that either. So I'll make sure you get those as well. Now, portions of today's presentation have been pre-recorded, and that's so that we can assure that you have the highest quality presentation and make sure that everything comes across. Now, as we go through the presentation, you'll have some questions. I can see that the chat room is already very active with their hellos and where we're calling from or where we're attending from. But there's also going to be poll questions, and it's very important that if you could just take a moment to respond to the poll questions as honestly as possible. And then, of course, we'll have questions. And the best way to access the questions is to access the question button in the chat. So when you look at the chat there, you have the pull down that represents the chat area. But if you change your option to QA, then those will be posted in a different section of our interface so that we'll understand that those are questions. Now, we'll answer some of the most basic questions right away, but I can assure you that for those that are a little bit more in depth or require a little bit more discussion, we'll have a Q&A session at the end. And then, again, please don't forget to fill out the survey. Again, please be honest and as quickly as possible when it comes to the survey, not only about what we're talking about today, but also about what you'd like to see in the future, because as we speak, we're starting to come up with some of the great ideas for the upcoming webinar series. So another question that I get quite often is, why Unreal? So the Unreal Engine really offers one asset with infinite uses. It is a complete package that has an 18-year legacy as a premier award-winning real-time engine. It truly is the professional tool of choice when it comes to the creation of amazing, or shall we say, epic video games, AAA games, all the way down to people working on their kitchen table, creating amazing presentations with their product designs. Just want to make sure we're still moving here. We have an enterprise team that is worldwide, and the enterprise team is, as you can imagine, or maybe you don't know, the team that really focuses on everything that is beyond the typical game environment. So that would be the architectural walkthrough, the product configurator, the scientific exploration, all of these elements that go beyond or outside the gaming world are represented in the enterprise group. We are everywhere with over 3 million users worldwide. You can imagine the amount of resources that are available to you through tutorials and books, a number of different packages, and a number of great people to call on when you need assistance or advice. And one of the coolest things about Unreal Engine is that it's free to use. You get the full tool set, source code. If you're presenting to your customer, there's no additional cost for doing that in the Unreal Engine. Now, if you're creating maybe a configuration pod that's going to go into 1,000 stores, when we talk about that kind of volume, then that's the kind of time that we would talk to you about some kind of an agreement. But for most of our customers doing products and different types of engineering work in the Unreal world, there's no additional cost. So what I'd like to do now is thank our friends, our sponsors in this webcast series. First, our friends at HTC, who are excited to announce their new Vive Pro coming out I think in about a month or so from this particular date. It really gives you the ability to spot every detail. If you haven't heard about the Vive Pro, it won amazing awards at CES, the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas recently, for its new design and capabilities. As you can see, really upping the resolutions and the ability to give you to see much more clearly the virtual reality presentations that you're coming up with. And I'm also very excited to let you know that they are creating a wireless adapter to remove the lines or the cabling that usually goes along with those. That'll be coming out a little bit later this year, and you can see here that it'll work with the Vive and Vive Pro. Of course, you'll need some good hardware to drive that. So thanks to our friends at Radeon Pro with AMD, they recommend, of course, some great features or great options. Sorry, that go along with their equipment. Let's just say that you'll see that I seem to have lost my mouse, so that's why I'm a bit distracted here. Now we're going. Are we going? Here we go. All right. So you can see that the WX7100 is a workstation graphics card. It's their 8 GB card. And let's just say that this is really the one that is the entry to the high end. And then moving forward from there, you can see that they have the 9100. That's the 16 GB card. This is really when your presentations start to take on a lot of polygons and a lot of textures, those kinds of things, and these can be ganged together in a duo. But these are, and you'll notice that I've highlighted in both of them that they are VR ready creator certified, so they really are ready for your VR experience. And then they're brought together with our friends at HP to create great solutions. The Z4 and the 7100 really represent a great combination for most situations. And then when you start to talk about really large data sets and really big types of presentations, that's when you can start to bring together dual 9100s in the Z8 and have the horsepower you need. So thanks again to all of our partners for sponsoring these. So back to the webinars. Again, this is webinar number 4. The previous webinars introduced the capability of product design in the Unreal Engine 4. We talked about data prep and translation of your data coming in. And then we also talked about Datasmith to accelerate your pipeline. None of that is required for today. Today, we're introducing you to the world of virtual reality for your presentations. I am going to post the links to those other ones. So again, don't be distracted. They'll all be there for you. And like I said, today is an introduction to VR, and then coming soon, more exciting elements in more series throughout the course of the year. So keep watching for more and more of these webinars to be presented. Now, some of you might be asking, well, what's this Datasmith you talk about? Craig is going to talk a little bit more about this in his presentation, but it really does allow for a much more streamlined approach to bringing in your CAD data into the Unreal Engine. And for those of you who tried that in the past, you know that that was a very laborious type of work. Now, currently, Datasmith is in its beta form. We encourage you, it's an open beta. We encourage you to join at the URL you see there. Please join up, give us your feedback, try it out. It's going to really make a difference in your workflow, bringing that in. So no matter what design application you're looking at, these are mostly, again, product design focused, but depending on what CAD format you're working with, it really is a fidelity to source to doing a lot of that manual labor that you used to have to do when it came to bringing in your CAD data. Now, when it comes to Datasmith, there are two different elements. There is the importer that sits inside of the Unreal Engine, and then there is the exporter currently associated with 3ds Max, which allows you to take things like texture maps, material shaders, and so on, and convert those directly into Unreal Engine elements. Again, streamlining the process so that you can focus more on the creativity. So that's enough from me. Let's go ahead and get our webinar started. The stuff that we're really excited to see. So I'm going to turn things over to Craig so that he can take things and introduce us to the world of VR. So Craig, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Eddie. Welcome to our fourth webinar here on Unreal Engine, specifically within the product design and manufacturing visualization workspace. Today we're going to do a really quick overview of Unreal Engine as it relates to this immersive realities space for design. So we're going to really take a look at how VR and AR in Unreal work for design review. So with that, let's get started here. So today's discussion, we're going to take a look at Unreal Engine and virtual reality. We're also going to look at VR hardware requirements. What's required to make sure that your project runs at the best performance necessary to make sure that you're getting what you need out of virtual reality so that it is a very believable and enjoyable experience. And we're going to take a look at some virtual reality and augmented reality starting points with Unreal Engine. Specifically, we'll focus more around the virtual reality template in that example. And we'll also look at some industrial uses that we're really seeing with these immersive realities. We're seeing virtual reality and augmented reality really changing the way CAD design is not only visualized, but experienced. This way of experiencing design in a very compelling and intuitive manner. So let's move forward here and take a look at some of the basics surrounding the world of virtual reality. So virtual reality faces a few challenges. And what these challenges are is how we define virtual reality, how we define a successful immersive experience that allows us to experience something in virtual sense. So it really must be believable. It must feel like you are there. If we lose that believability, right away we lose the experience. So regardless of whether it's something for entertainment or something for a simulation or training, or a different sector within a variety of different industries, if it's CAD design, for example, it must be believable. It must have real-world scale. It must have the feeling that the object you're viewing and experiencing is there. It needs to be interactive, and interactive can be anything from something as simple as some simple movements of moving your head around something, or teleporting around something, or actually physically walking around an object in a room or a space. But it could also be more in-depth where you can actually interact with the geometry. You know, maybe you're changing materials, or you're actually grabbing pieces of the geometry to explore them up close, or removing them. Whatever that interactivity is, at the end of the day, it must match your movements. And again, if it's something as simple as moving your head, it needs to follow that real time, and it needs to add to that overall experience of that as well. So explorable. We want virtual reality to achieve the ability to allow for a personal experience. And this is what separates different kinds of applications or viewing on a flat two-dimensional screen from a virtual or an immersive experience like virtual or augmented reality. We need to allow for the infinite ways that something can be experienced. So if it's a CAD design, for example, we want people to be able to experience that product or that vehicle or that component on their own terms so that they can turn it around or manipulate it or even stick their head directly inside the object and be able to see the design as it were. And that's the cool thing about these immersive realities is it really does allow people to experience on their own terms in their own way that they would want to do that. It allows for something that is very intuitive and is very second nature in that sense of a visualization technique. Immersive. And this here I've put at the bottom because at the end of the day, if we don't have the believability and we don't have the interactive, we're not going to have an immersive experience. So for a VR or an AR experience to be successful, it needs to be immersive. And in order to be immersive, you have to have that believability with that interactive component to really make sure that it brings you into what it is that you're experiencing. That environment or that CAD design or whatever that experience is so that it really brings you in and immerses you into that virtual realm. So let's take a look at how virtual reality is transforming industries, how it's affecting business, for example. We're seeing virtual reality in many different realms. Of course, we talked about things like entertainment, but we're seeing it used extensively in areas like manufacturing, architectural, engineering, construction industries. We're seeing it also used in simulation and training. But here's what it really brings to transforming those industries. You get this idea of faster prototyping and design. So virtual reality really does reduce the product design risk. It allows for changes, it allows for iterations, it allows for interaction. And the cool thing about it as well is this idea of real-world scale to really bring a compelling story of design to the overall idea of prototyping something. So this idea of experiencing something in a real-world scale, a real-world environment, before it's even realized in a physical sense. Before we get into that physical prototyping, we can experience the design in a virtual sense. And Unreal Engine really brings that ability to allow you to prototype your CAD designs very quickly before you even get down that road of building a physical prototype. And of course, all of this really reduces the time to market. At the end of the day, this is a more efficient process that allows for better design simply because you can find issues perhaps and fix them quicker before even realizing a physical product. The idea of taking a CAD design, a product design, or a vehicle or a component of something and be able to experience that on real-world scale allows for better design overall, and it shortens or reduces that overall time to market. It also makes that pipeline of realizing your first physical prototype that much more quicker and efficient and effective in the end there as well. It increases business agility and flexibility. So what do we mean by that? Well, this idea of testing products in a virtual environment before committing to the physical product. But this could also be testing this with a group of subjects, right? A focus group, for example, testing a product and seeing if that virtual product as it exists is something that is going to cater to what it needs to cater to. It is going to serve what it needs to serve before even physically realizing it as well. So testing products in this environment really does increase this flexibility and agility for a variety of different industries. And of course, simulation and training. This is one of the biggest areas we see VR being utilized today. This idea of creating simulations or training environments for something, for example, like working a vehicle, maybe a crane, for example, before even sitting in that actual vehicle or that product or that crane. This ability to train in a very safe and controlled environment and have something that feels much like the real object. In that sense, maybe it is something like training for space or firefighters or training to operate a vehicle long before actually getting to that actual vehicle. And once they get into that environment, they're more comfortable, educated, and they've developed that sense of how everything works because of the virtual simulator or training environment that they've been given. And of course, we have the safety element. This ability to be in a controlled environment and be completely separated from the dangers of something like maybe firefighter training or a different physical environment that may bring a lot of risks to it. Simulation and training in a virtual environment certainly has all of that advantages to it to be able to experience something in a safe and controlled environment there as well. Let's jump forward here to take a look at, continuing on our talk of virtual reality and the basics here. Some of the equipment and all of this equipment here and how it relates to Unreal Engine. So we're going to see how we can use something like a head-mounted display, and what you constantly hear or you'll often hear is a head-mounted display referred to as something like an HMD, and that's literally is the acronym for a head-mounted display. And this typically is a high-end device enabled by a powerful PC or some hardware that will allow us to run that. Something like the high-end performance workstations that HP puts together for us, running some of the AMD Radeon Pro cards that are really tuned in to be able to enable virtual reality to run at that high performance rate that we need it to run on. So some of the devices, these head-mounted displays that we're working with here, for example, today I'm using the HTC Vive, and most recently, Vive just announced the Pro version of the Vive, so it's a whole new headset, much more advanced, higher resolution, and a bunch of new features on there. And as well, HP has unveiled their Windows Mixed Reality Pro Edition, which is a completely different headset there in its own realm as well. So both of these, though, will, of course, track head position and orientation. So that's what this idea of this HMD, or head-mounted display. And controllers. This is something that you'll typically see as handheld devices that allow users to interact with their environment. And this can be interaction in the way of pointing at something, or actually using them to physically pick up a virtual object, or to transport around through a variety of different means, so that allows to walk forward, for example, or to actually teleport or beam to a different part in an area to interact with data. So a haptic gear. Haptic gear is this idea of wearable input devices that provide sensory feedback to the user. Now, a lot of the motion controllers that we see with head-mounted displays are haptic, in the sense that you'll get vibration, or you'll get this force feedback that will tell you something that may be happening with the experience that you're having within your virtual reality experience there. And of course, we touched on this idea of high-end hardware. You know, using a very high-end performance system is important, because virtual reality and augmented reality requires powerful hardware, especially when we get into really deep CAD data and we want to experience that in a VR sense. We're really going to need that high performance hardware to give us the proper believability or experience of that virtual reality experience. You know, experiencing CAD data, for example, you really need the high performance hardware to make sure that the experience is enjoyable. There is a thing called motion sickness, or as they call it, VR sickness, where if that frame rate isn't hit, that minimum frame rate of 90 frames per second, you're actually going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to feel what we call VR sickness, and it very much is this feeling of motion sickness there. So if we don't have the right high-performance hardware, the right high-performance GPU, much like the fine folks at AMD build with their Radeon Pros, we're going to have an issue here. We're not going to hit that smooth performance that we require to make virtual reality comfortable and believable. So here's some, we were talking about the HTC Vive Pro that was really recently announced. There's an image of it there, and this provides, as they say, this true virtual reality freedom. And of course, HP with their Windows Mixed Reality headset, they've announced the Professional Edition recently, and there's the controllers that come with that one there as well. And I just wanted to point out some of the Radeon Pro cards that AMD, as being part of this webinar here, they have these amazing cards that Eddie mentioned at the beginning. Here's an example of that WX7100 and the WX9100 that are both highly VR capable, high performance cards to allow you to get into your immersive VR creation and experiences. So let's jump into Unreal Engine as the virtual reality and the augmented reality solution. So Unreal Engine really is built for performance without sacrificing quality. So VR requires complex scenes rendered at high frame rates, very high frame rates, and there really are no shortcuts. Unreal Engine allows us to realize this and create immersive virtual reality experiences by hitting those high frame rates. And again, I mentioned that Unreal can handle and is scalable to whatever your hardware is. The higher the performance hardware, the higher Unreal is going to be able to produce for you as well. And because Unreal Engine 4 comes from this world of the AAA game world, and it's built and designed for demanding applications like filmmaking and photoreal visualization, Unreal Engine meets all the requirements and provides a solid foundation to build upon for your virtual reality experiences. So to create believable and immersive experiences, Unreal Engine is the go-to solution for creating those as well. So both powerful and proven, the world's leading brands consistently choose Unreal Engine to bring their stories to life. And whether it is something like a AAA game title, or now we're seeing complete films being made in Unreal Engine, and we're seeing a lot of immersive CAD data, complete architectural data sets, complete cities even, down to complete vehicles full of complex CAD data, that we're able to have this immersive virtual experience with virtual reality and augmented reality, where we're able to experience these designs in very compelling manners. So a rendering pipeline within Unreal Engine, I mentioned that frame rate and how VR really requires a very high frame rate for that believability, that comfort, and that overall experience. We need to hit that minimum of 90 hertz, or that minimum of 90 frames per second, to be a comfortable virtual reality experience. That is the minimum that we need to hit. So most VR productions today use that as the minimum frame rate, and of course they'll go into much higher frame rates to realize that comfortability or that believability and immersiveness for their virtual reality experiences. So the higher the resolution for VR and the more challenging the VR scene, the more high performance you're going to require. And of course, hardware is important, but Unreal Engine brings that high performance caliber to make sure that you can visualize and experience your VR at the highest caliber possible. And of course, Unreal has tools that'll scale from very simple scenes, like we're going to see a CAD design here of a bike from SolidWorks that we can explore around by simply walking around. But we can also get into really extremely detailed scenes, very dense, multi-component scenes with hundreds of millions of polygons that we can experience in complex environments or even complex characters. Unreal brings this to you in a virtual or augmented sense as well. Of course, Unreal Engine has, as I touched upon, we're seeing films being built with Unreal Engine and very photoreal visualizations. This is because of the advanced cinematic post-processing capabilities right out of the box. So this idea of taking advantage of photoreal capabilities to be able to realize virtual reality in a very believable and very realistic sense, Unreal Engine brings that capability with it. And the great thing about Unreal Engine is this idea of this low friction startup, this idea of being able to realize very rapid iterations. Plug in your dev kit, whatever that may be that you prefer to work with, and go. When I create my virtual reality data sets within Unreal Engine, I connect my HTC Vive, and everything is there as expected. All the tools that I'm used to, but as well, when I want to build out a standalone application, it literally is as simple as just customizing my settings and also just hitting package that project, define where I want to put it, and I can now have a standalone, completely separate, launchable application that I can share with the world, whether it be a client to visualize data or someone else to experience their CAD design. Unreal Engine is the solution for being able to get to that point of experiencing a believable, immersive, virtual or augmented reality scene. And of course, frequent updates for the latest VR and AR hardware and software. Unreal Engine works on a very organic type of development system where we're seeing constant updates to the Unreal ecosystem so that we can take advantage of this as we go. So let's take a look at some video samples here. All of these things that we're looking at here, this is kind of a nice slick reel of some very cool and very small sample of some amazing work done out there with virtual reality and augmented reality right out of Unreal Engine. So, here I've put together some samples of different industries, mostly focusing on architectural design here, but also into the manufacturing world, whether it's automotive, but also looking at how we are able to create these beautiful virtual reality and augmented reality simulations here directly out of Unreal Engine. And all of this is built using Unreal Engine as its main core to be able to realize these scenes, to create these believable, very beautiful, compelling, immersive virtual reality scenes. And of course, these are created for a variety of different head-mounted displays. The HTC Vive is one of the most common that we see out there, used for its power and its capabilities. And Unreal Engine is able to create these beautiful scenes for a variety of different needs, whether it's a visualization sense or experiencing an architectural scene, or even for simulation and training. We're seeing lots of amazing samples out here where we are able to take advantage of some simulation and training in virtual reality and augmented reality to be able to learn before even experiencing the real thing. And Unreal Engine really brings that capability, that performance and that power to realize that, as well as that performance and that power to build very photorealistic, very believable virtual reality scenes. So let's jump into the Epic Games launcher here and take a look at some starting points for creating virtual reality or working with virtual reality in Unreal Engine. So you can see that I have a couple of different projects in here. I'm currently going to work with 4.19 Preview 4, which is the latest build. You can work with any version you want to here. It's the same idea that I'm going to be working with. Now, if I go ahead and I hit launch on the version that I want to work with, I'm going to get this option to browse to my project or to create a new project. While that's loading, I wanted to show something here. In the marketplace for Unreal Engine, there's some excellent, a whole variety of different pieces available here, whether they're models or materials, textures, sound effects, overall particle effects, whatever they may be. The marketplace is infinitely filled with lots of different places to grab data to start with. So one of the examples here is also if we start to type in something like VR, for example, in the search content, you'll find VR related different components, different data sets, assets, different little components that you can use in your project. So something I just wanted to point out that there are different starting points available in there as well. So let's go back to our project template here. So we can see that with the project browser in Unreal, I do have a couple of different projects that I've worked with, but I want to create a new project. In here you can see that I have, by default, the blank project, and this is sitting underneath this blueprint tab. Now we also have this C++ tab. We want to create a blueprint project. Blueprints in Unreal are essentially visual scripting. They're a node-based way of connecting code in a very visual format. And this is what we want to work with in here. Now you can see that the thumbnail is going to update and give us a preview as to what anything is. If I click on a vehicle, it's going to give me a kind of a vehicle starting point type of setup. A third person would give me a third person perspective of a different character. And I want to use this virtual reality template. This is an excellent starting point in here to build a VR project. Now, you can see that I'm going to leave everything default. I may want to just give the project a different name. Now, in the interest of time, I do have a project already created here so that we can jump in. And this is exactly what you get with the VR template. Now you can see that I have all these little letter A icons around here. I'm just going to hit the G hotkey to turn off any of those extra components so that we can see what we're working with here with the base of the VR template. Now the VR template is an excellent resource for starting out to build your own content in virtual reality within Unreal Engine. And the nice thing about this is it gives you a couple of different options. So we have option 1 on the left, which is a head-mounted display. As you can see, it's just a standalone head-mounted display kind of hovering in space. And all that would be is to build either a data set or a virtual reality experience around a standalone head-mounted display, or it gives you the option to have something like maybe a gamepad to work with that head-mounted display. Now on the right is a head-mounted display with some motion controllers, and we can see that we have a head-mounted display and we have some little hands present in here. The cool thing about this is that this can be swapped out, or those hands for that matter can be swapped out to be any kind of controllers for the headset you're working with. For example, I'm working with the HTC Vive, so I could make those hands into whatever I wanted them to be. I could customize those hands or make them into different props or get rid of them altogether or have them as the Vive controllers. Let's take a look at how this HMD and motion controller map works. The other great thing about this template is it actually gives you the full path as to where those starter maps exist. An HMD locomotion map on the left for a headset without any controllers, and this motion controller map on the right for a headset with motion controllers. And that's the one we want. So if you have the content browser on the bottom, at the root of the content level, we'll see something here called Virtual Reality BP, and that is that virtual reality blueprint type of setup or project that we're working with that we want to work with. So I'm just going to double click, go in there, and I'm going to go to Maps, and I can see underneath here HMD plus motion controller. It's telling me that I want the motion controller map, and there it is right there. So I'll just simply double click on that and load up that map. Now this is going to give me a really basic starting point in here. If I tumble around, in fact, what we're going to see that we have is a really basic scene. It says, of course, VR template, and we're working with a head-mounted display with some motion controllers in here. But you'll also see that it has this grabbing ability because it does give you the option to use some hands in here. Now this is a really simple scene. Again, this is a template. It's a starting point. You could use these objects, you could replace these objects, or you could get rid of them altogether, delete them out of the scene, and of course bring in your own objects, your own scene, your own CAD data. And that's what we want to look at today, is some some product design or maybe some manufacturing data here. But just to start with how the template works, what you would need to keep in mind is some of the basics here. This is going to give you all the basic setup for working with virtual reality and Unreal Engine. So for example, the cameras are pre-set up. You have a character to walk around pre-set up, and a character in the sense of it is going to track your head-mounted display. It's going to track your motion controllers as well and bring them live into your Unreal Engine project here to be able to utilize them to build your virtual reality setup in any way that you want to have it. The important thing to note on that as well is that I happen to have a VR headset set up. I'm working with the Vive here today. So I have a Vive and I have some controllers set up, and I want to make sure that I have that set up when I'm working with VR in Unreal. Now, I don't absolutely need to have that, but really, if I'm going to create with VR, you want to have your head-mounted display and your controllers to be able to see how it's going to work. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to preview it or experience it as you work. Now, Unreal is smart enough to detect if you have a head-mounted display connected to it. If you don't, you won't see this VR preview, or you will see it, but it'll be grayed out. It won't be selectable. You'll have just something like the default setup here, which if I hit play, it's just going to let me just see this world, but not in a VR sense. So I want to grab this little pull-down menu here and set it to VR preview. And in doing that, it's actually going to launch a VR preview here. So I do have my head-mounted display here, and I also have some controllers here, which you can see that I have a hand sitting inside the scene in here that I can work with. And I do have the other one. You have to excuse me. I'm using my hands, and I have a headset going here while I'm recording this. But anyways, so I'm actually able to see my environment, and I'm also able to interact with or move around in the environment if I need to. So what the VR template is going to give you is right out of the box, it's going to give you some motion controllers, things like hands, which you can swap them into changing them into different things. And it's also going to give you the ability to teleport around in the scene if you want to be able to do that as well. So at any time now, because I've selected that VR preview, I can go ahead and just hit that and be able to launch into kind of a standalone version of my preview here and be able to work with it as I go. So I wanted to show the VR template really simply here as to how it works within Unreal Engine and what it provides for you. And it provides the real basic starting points, and you can customize, of course, all of these things. Again, like I said, replace the geometry or delete it all and bring in your CAD data or your data that you wanted to work with in here. So the VR template is a really excellent starting point. And what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at another project that I have set up with some actual real CAD data from SolidWorks right inside Unreal Engine using the VR template, and how I can manipulate or move around within that scene, and how I can work with that data live within Unreal Engine as well. And what I also want to do is show how you can build out a project. So I'm just going to switch over to that project here right now. So here we are. I have this project that I've brought in here, and this is an important project to look at for a couple of reasons, as we'll see. This data set is created here so that we are working with SolidWorks data. This is a full CAD data set brought directly into Unreal Engine via Datasmith, and I'm able to work with this CAD data live inside Unreal Engine. And what I want to do here is create a virtual reality project. So just to show you what we're getting here, I'm just going to switch over to my launcher. And I've actually created this simple little SolidWorks VR starting point here, or this is my little project that I've put together. I brought the motorcycle in, and we've actually built out a VR version. Now there's two versions. I can click desktop and just work without VR, but in this case we want to have some fun and actually explore the data in VR. So we can see now that I'm using my headset to be able to move around in space, and of course I have my Vive controller in here as well that I can access to be able to move around in space as well if I need to. And here we go. So what I want to do is actually just teleport around, and maybe actually maybe not that far away, but bring it in a little bit closer to the bike. And then if I rotate around, I can start to look at my data up nice and close. So if I want to get into maybe the front frame here, I can actually stick my head right inside that frame if I wanted to do that. So I'm actually just going to spin around and maybe take a look at a different part of the bike here, maybe from the top down, and we can see that I can get a bunch of different angles in here, and I'm actually able to work with the data wherever it is that I want to kind of teleport to or move around to. For example, here I'm just going to maybe teleport in a little bit further away and maybe get a little bit closer here to the bike. Let's just zoom right in to maybe around the front tire here. And what I can start to do is maybe get in a little bit closer into some of the other details that I have in here. I'm just going to get right to the side down in here so that I can see things like the top view of the bike here, and something really cool. I can actually stick my head right inside the gas tank and have a look around. And this allows me to kind of experience this data in a very different way. So I'm actually, rather than looking at my CAD designs flat and on a screen, I'm actually able to stick my head right inside that data. I can even get right inside the engine here as well to take a look at different components. So I can see how the data is actually working in real world scale. I can even mimic sitting on top of the bike and maybe taking a look at the full scale of this. So it's always, of course, difficult to explain this when you're looking at it on a flat screen, but of course looking at it in virtual reality is a very amazing experience to experience your designs, your CAD data in a very compelling way. So this idea of this experiential design is what Unreal really brings with it, especially with a tool like Datasmith, which I've used here to bring my data live into Unreal Engine so that I'm able to actually take a look at it a number of different angles and different ways to work with my data here and see how the data overall works here as I'm visualizing it, or for that matter, experiencing the data as I go here. So I'm able to actually stick, like I said, I can stick my head right inside the engine if I wanted to. I can look at the data from all different angles in here. And simply what I've done is I've just built this out. Let me just move back out here into a bit, just kind of move into outer space here. And what I'm actually going to do is flip back into my project so we can see how we've created that here. So you have to excuse me, I have to take the headset off and get my microphone repositioned here. And I'm now back into my Unreal scene so that I can work with the data as it's built. So the cool thing about this data set is, again, this is right over from SolidWorks, and using the Datasmith plugin, I was able to import the CAD directly into Unreal Engine here, and we're able to work with this and actually build this into a very cool VR project that lets us experience the data or this motorcycle design in real world scale so that we can experience it virtually before we even realize it physically, right? So it's an excellent way to really explore and experience your designs here. And then what I've done is I've simply set this up. This is using the VR template, and then built this out as a VR project. So we built this as a simple little standalone project, a desktop version, and this very simple kind of walk around VR version. So we'll come to that in a moment as to how that was created. A very cool little side story here. Just recently at an event, what we had was at SolidWorks World, we had an actual motorcycle designer put the headset on and dive around inside this motorcycle, and he actually found a couple of different design flaws, things that maybe a chain that might have collided with an area of the bike that may not work properly in the real world. And he was able to identify those areas that could be corrected very quickly by experiencing that design in virtual reality. So that was very cool to see a real motorcycle designer kind of crawl around on his hands and knees and find issues with the bike that would be more difficult to find simply in working in a kind of a flat screen workflow. So we have our bike here in Unreal. If I want to take this now and build this out to something that I can experience in virtual reality as a standalone virtual reality launchable app, much like we just played around with there, how would I do that? Well, in Unreal Engine, it makes it very simple for you. So simply put, what we would do is we would set our project over here. So you can see that I have over here underneath my file area here, I have down below our project access points. But I also have this thing here called package project. And that's what I'm working with in here. So I want to go down and take a look at the package settings. So I'll just click that, and we can see that the package settings here, we have pretty much everything is left to the default setting for the most part. And maybe what we might want to do is customize some of the different things, like maybe put in a custom thumbnail into here. Like here we have a little project thumbnail of the bike. We may even want to put in the project name, or we may even want to put in our creators' names as a company, for example. Whatever it is that we want to put in here as a publisher or a creator of that project. I'm just going to get out of those project settings, and we'll go back to File, Package Project. Now, I had packaged this for Windows as a 64-bit executable, and the way that I would do that is just simply go to Package Project, Windows 64-bit, and I can simply launch that and begin to package this up into my VR build. Now it's going to ask me for where I want to put that. I would define it in here. In this case, it's going to give me once as well, just to show you what you would get. So I called this one here SolidWorks Final. You're going to get something like this Windows No Editor, because it is just a standalone application, nothing to do with a launchable Unreal editor in that sense. This is a project that you could share with clients, with friends. You could share it online. You could share it, maybe on an online store even, or on a website or someplace that you might want people to experience your designs. They could simply do that and be able to go in and be able to launch that project and work with it, much like I just did there as well. And that's exactly what it is. It's going to give you these folders in here with which Unreal Engine builds. You don't have to worry about any of those. But this is the little SolidWorks, I've called it SolidWorks, but this is the little launchable application that we can launch, and we can explore and experience our CAD design in that sense. So it's a standalone application that lives outside of Unreal, and again, it's very portable, very shareable way to work. So very easy to work with VR in Unreal Engine when we have these tools like the VR template. And that's exactly what's going on here. We're using the VR template, importing CAD data in. Of course, we spent some time. If you're interested in how the materials or the lighting is applied, you can watch some of our other webinars. But in this case here, we're literally using a template. We've brought in some CAD data, and all we're doing is packaging that out. Very simply, like I've just shown there, we would simply go to File, Package Project, and you would select to where you want this to go. If you're going to something like a Mac format or a different format, you can simply do that. In this case, I just went to Windows 64-bit, and it's a shareable standalone application that launches as its own VR app. And this is an excellent way to experience that data or share your experience of your CAD design with anyone at that point. Okay, so we're going to move on here and take a look at a couple of other things related to Unreal Engine and creating virtual reality, and also how Datasmith works within Unreal Engine here as well. So now I want to touch upon the HP VR Launch Kit for Unreal Engine. This is something that was recently announced, and it is an excellent piece of kit here that we've had Epic Games and HP partner together to provide. So what is it? Well, it's a toolkit for Unreal Engine for streamlined virtual reality development and deployment. And what this gives you is the ability to profile for optimized hardware, which will in the end significantly reduce the time required to transform your CAD designs into real-time VR experiences. So this is a full toolkit designed to work in conjunction with high-end hardware like HP produces, with the high-end performance of Unreal Engine, so that you're able to jump in quickly and be able to streamline your virtual reality development and get whatever it is you're trying to achieve, whether it's an architectural visualization or experiencing CAD data, for example, for a motorcycle, that you can jump in and actually experience that data in that sense. And the toolkit, or the launch kit, is built to give you these basic tools in there. So let's take a look at who it's for. Well, it's for anyone from the product design world, or maybe an architectural engineer or construction world, any of these professionals who are either experienced in VR and need to streamline their development processes. So this is the idea of being able to jump right into Unreal Engine, have a series of examples, and also some very effective profiling tools to make sure that everything's going to run smooth and give you the best performance possible for whatever it is that you're trying to create for your virtual reality environment. And we've also created this for people that are brand new to virtual reality. Someone that needs something very simple and fast to get into and build their design visualization process for a virtual reality application. So whether you're a pro out there, a seasoned veteran, or someone that's brand new to this launch kit is for you. This toolkit brings a comprehensive set of tools to allow you to realize your virtual reality goals right out of Unreal Engine. So what's included? As I mentioned, we have this idea of a virtual reality performance profiler that comes with it. And this works right within Unreal Engine, and what it's going to do is determine the optimal computer configurations needed for VR deployment here. So this profile can tell you your overall configuration of your hardware and give you output as to how that's going to perform for your virtual reality content creation. And of course, I mentioned some sample data sets. So what we include with this is the ability to take some sample virtual reality experiences right out of the box that you can jump in and experience, but as well as things like those VR templates and more to come as well, and also learning materials. So there are some basic demo sets that come in there. For the architectural world, we have some SketchUp, Revit, AutoCAD, and 3ds Max data sets that you can jump right into Unreal Engine and explore and experience. And as well on the manufacturing side, we have a nice SolidWorks data set, that motorcycle, for example, that we can jump in and explore and be able to play with as a real data set to create something for virtual reality right out of Unreal Engine. And Unreal Engine within the HP VR Launch Kit also comes with a trial of Datasmith, so you can try it yourself. You can leverage the sample data or import your own CAD designs and bring your own files right into Unreal Engine and take advantage of the power of Datasmith with the ability to bring CAD data live right into Unreal Engine and be able to create virtual reality experiences right out of the box with your own data. So let's take a look at Datasmith. You know, Eddie talked about this at the beginning there. I just want to take a look at summarizing what Datasmith is here and take a look at some of the key points in here. So Datasmith, frictionless CAD workflows. So Unreal and Datasmith, we have 3 key points there. We need to have accuracy in translating that CAD data. We need to be able to experience that data anywhere, and that's what Unreal Engine brings for you, this ability to create augmented or virtual reality experiences of your data. And we want you to be able to ramp up quickly. And Datasmith brings that with Unreal Engine. This idea of conquering complexity for engineers and designers. You can save hours, days, even weeks on the idea of translating or making your CAD data fit by having Datasmith take care of this behind the scenes and having it optimize that data and bring it over. So in the end, you can save a lot of time by making sure that this non-destructive workflow brings your CAD data in as you expect it and as you need it to be. So Datasmith Direct Import. I just wanted to put in a couple of different samples. This is an example of some of the file formats that are supported. And of course, this list is constantly growing. There will be more as time goes on. But here's what we have the ability to support directly into Unreal Engine with Datasmith as well. So a traditional workflow, Eddie talked about this a little bit. You know, this idea of taking data from a CAD package and maybe you have to jump into something else like Max or Maya or whatever it may be, and you need to merge the objects and reduce the polygons and go on and on, this whole translation, and be able to export into a format that Unreal Engine will understand. Well, Datasmith takes all of this and does it all for you. And recently we've also included Python into the Datasmith workflow, which will allow you to customize what components you want or don't want, or maybe how you want something to be reduced as far as the polygonal count. It really is unlimited. It's up to you to how you maybe want to script that translation of that data over into Unreal Engine. So Python is now part of the Datasmith workflow. So I want to thank you for joining me today and taking a look at this quick overview of being able to work with CAD designs or data of any kind for that matter in a sense of virtual reality and augmented reality right out of Unreal Engine. So I want to thank our sponsors there. I want to thank HP and AMD and also HTC Vive for helping us achieve our virtual reality goals and giving us the hardware that's required to really get the most compelling and beautiful virtual reality data sets that we can out of Unreal Engine. Hey, Eddie.
Well, thank you, Craig. That was amazing as usual. A lot of great stuff in there. So, thanks again for providing us with a lot of this really good introductory information. And I know that we are currently talking about much deeper insights as far as the VR world and what you can do with those. But again, as you saw in the polls, most of the people attending today are brand new to this, and I was really amazed at how in the chat room a lot of people were helping one another understand the capabilities of the different keep workflows. So thanks to everybody in the chat room, and thanks again to you, Craig. So can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Or am I just talking too much? So I'm not hearing you, sir.
You're not hearing me.
Nope.
My mic is going.
Craig? In the meantime, we're getting a lot of questions. Most of the questions that we're getting are regarding. I still can't hear you, sir.
It looks like they can hear both of us. They're saying in the chat.
Oh, okay. So everybody else is hearing you. No, I unplugged mine. Well, that makes sense. Sorry about that. So I'm going to take the first question, and a lot of people are asking us about, what about the different packages that maybe we didn't list regarding Datasmith. And again, Datasmith is in its beta form. It is getting closer and closer to its actual release. So we have lots of good news coming up for that very soon. But when we talk about, will this be supported or will that be supported, I can assure you that there is nothing that is not on the table. And when you talk about applications like Maya, Cinema 4D, Blender, SketchUp, the list is quite extensive. We recognize that all of these are being used to generate 3D data, and that 3D data is important to you for the presentation in this virtual world. So all of them are being looked at. Some, of course, are easier to incorporate than others, and that will determine how soon we can get them out. But in the meantime, again, I've posted in the chat room the link to the beta. It's an open beta, so it's open for everybody. I'm getting an overwhelming response. But please join the beta so that we can get your input, so we can get your comments about which the different packages are important to you. And so I'm going to step back and let Craig take a couple of questions and plug my headset back in. So go ahead, Craig.
Good job, Eddie. Thanks. We have a couple things there. A bunch of things that I could probably answer at once. One of them here was around a Datasmith plugin for SketchUp. So as Eddie mentioned, we have many different packages that are being supported. SketchUp is one of them. In a portion there of the webinar, I mentioned the HP Epic joint venture with the VR Launch Kit. Part of that Launch Kit comes with a bunch of different data sets. So you can use them as they're demo sets essentially, but they're full complete projects. And one of them is a SketchUp project that you can take the data right live into Unreal using Datasmith. There's also a Revit version in there. There's a 3ds Max project, and there's a SolidWorks project as well. The SolidWorks project, maybe as I mentioned, this answers maybe a few questions here, is actually a version, a more complete and finished version of that motorcycle. So you get the entire SolidWorks project as it relates to Datasmith. So you can bring the whole thing into Unreal and be able to explore how things are built, or take your own data, of course, and use it in a Datasmith project. So with that offering there, it comes with a bunch of different packaged kind of goods to allow you to learn the Datasmith workflows with a variety of different CAD data sets there as well. So SketchUp, yes, and a pile of others, and many more coming, as Eddie mentioned there as well. Eddie, do you have any? I see you've been. I think it looks like you marked a couple questions in here. There's a question back here about the application file. Do you only need the application file, or do you need the entire folder? I'm not sure. Oh, they may be talking about the actual executable. I think the VR launchable. So when you build that out, it actually Unreal builds a little package for you. The executable is a tiny little file. I can't remember the exact size of the one that I was using there, but all of the content that executable launches or accesses is in those folders there. So you do need kind of that package. It builds a little directory, and then inside are the folders required with the executable there. So as far as portability goes, you would transfer or translate around that entire package of folders in there. I think that's what that question was related to directly there, hopefully. When will the final beta be ready? Well, we're building up towards a launch, so stay tuned on that. The beta is still live and open that you can grab. The beta is free right now. Just be aware, I saw someone post that they're waiting a while for their beta. We do have an enormous amount of people on the beta right now, and the numbers are growing. So it does take some time to get your beta, and that's just simply because of combing through all of the different applications they have. So just be patient with that, but they are combing through and trying to get as many people as they can into that beta as fast as they can. Someone had some question around, there's a couple of questions there around working with motion controllers in Unreal. There are a bunch of different tutorials out there. I saw Michael from AMD. Thank you, Michael, for tuning in. He posted a great little PDF doc there that I believe he put together himself as well with working with the motion controller. So there are a variety of different things out there on the Unreal documentation site. We have a bunch of things around that. Eddie had mentioned before, more advanced or deeper webinars going forward. That could simply be one that maybe we do a bit more of a deep dive into customizing or changing controllers or setting up controllers as it relates to VR. Eddie, do you have any more questions that you've marked or put down anywhere? So someone said about the standalone executable. I did show that in the webinar, literally just clicking that and launching it, playing around with it in there. That's that screen that gives you the choice. We just built in quickly a desktop non-VR version and a VR version. Cinema 4D, Eddie, I think mentioned before, we do have a bunch of different applications on the map. The map for what we're trying to cater to is huge. So we're trying to get to as many of them as we can. They're kind of starting from what the research that the dev team has found, and a lot of it's also based off the beta with Datasmith, that we find user bases regarding different CAD packages out there and different formats of CAD data, as well as different digital content creation tools. And we're kind of going down the list as what we're finding as to be the more popular depending on the needs. Datasmith is set to actually service the CAD and design industry. So that is one area that we're working towards for the most part. And then adding these other applications, these other DCC applications in there as well is what we're trying to do in there. Things like Maya, Cinema 4D, Blender was mentioned. So there's many more things to come. Definitely more to come around the entire Datasmith idea going forward as well. So stay tuned for info around that. I think that Eddie's having a bit of technical problems there with his microphone clicking in and out as well. There's a question there around working with external renderers with Datasmith. One of them here is importing Keyshot for Datasmith. I wouldn't rule that out. However, as far as external renderers, we do have the guys from the Chaos group with V-Ray, where we're able to support materials and lighting coming over from V-Ray setups into Unreal Engine. And so I would not rule out the idea of something further like a KeyShot or anything. That's open for discussion and development, and for need, of course, by user base. So Salim there with V-Ray material is going to be introduced in UE4 soon. I don't know about introduced into there, but there is a Datasmith support in the works for more advanced V-Ray support, as mentioned. You know, one of the challenges, of course, coming from other packages to other packages, regardless of what they are, is the support of external materials. So that is something that we're working towards supporting there. I think we should wrap it up here. I'm going to wrap it up and say thank you to everyone for attending the webinar. Eddie has put some past webinars up there. If you registered for this, you will get a link emailed to you as well. And thanks a lot for tuning in, guys. We'll be doing more around CAD, and we also have an entire series on architectural as well. And there's lots of cool things coming over the next few months. So please stay tuned as we add more cool things to Datasmith workflows with Unreal Engine. Thanks, guys.
Yes. Don't forget to fill out that survey when you get that link so that you can let us know what you're looking for in our next webinar series. There's a lot of, like I said, as we speak, we're considering what to do for the upcoming year. So thanks again for filling that out, and thanks again for attending. Thanks again to our partners, HTC, AMD, and HP, for all of their support as well. So thanks again, everyone. Have a good one.